Now, Jesus answers questions many times with stories, and Luke 10 is an example. And he answered it by this example. Jesus said, "Who is my neighbor? Let's see. A certain man was leaving Jerusalem going down to Jericho. He began his journey in Jerusalem, the citadel of religious authority, and he's going down to Jericho. He's walking from Jerusalem, that's about 2,300 miles above sea level, and at the end of his 13 to 20 mile walk, he'll be 1,300 feet below sea level. He's going to take this popular road. It's circuitous, it has a steep, immediate drop on its perpendicular, and because of its circuitous design, it is ripe for bandits to camp out and rob travelers. He's finished with his religious obligations. The association meeting is over, and so he's on his way home. He's been away for about 14 days, and now it's time to go home. But that's about the length of time, for those of you who think that I may just be spinning a yarn, that the person would be gone. On his way home, he's accosted. Now, he fought back, that's why he's naked and beaten, wounded and half dead. Because even the bandits operated by a code: let us just rob you, you can keep your clothes, if not, we'll beat you down. And they did. He was between life and death. A certain man on a journey, beaten and left half dead. Not too far, I guess, in time, distance of time, there is a priest that's taking the same journey who sees this man, fallen humanity. He sees him, he looks at him, and as he passes by, he says, "Lord, help him." When he himself is the answer to his own prayer. Lord, help him. Just not with me. And a Levite comes after him and does almost the same thing. Well, why not? I mean, since the priest is the teacher and the Levite is the student, like teacher, they look and see and say, with all of the analytical precision, it says, he's beaten up, naked, he's dying, half dead, and keep on going. Now, let's not be too hard. Because, you know, when you're busy, you don't have time for broken people. I mean, don't act like you stop by everybody that's been broken on the side of the road, you know. It's said that one scholar reports that God was having a hard time getting Moses' attention. So he had to set a bush on fire. I like that. And Moses was busy doing the right stuff. He's in his father-in-law's employ, overlooking the sheep. So, I mean, he's doing what he's supposed to do. He's working. That's what we teach our children. If you're going to be responsible, get education, get a job, be responsible, pay your bills. So maybe the priest and the Levite, they are busy doing the good, they're on their way. The problem with that is we can get so busy that we miss out on God moments, miracle opportunities where we miss God. Have you ever met a dull person that wonders what's so surprising about a sunrise are a sunset. Don't you just not like people like that? That they are so blind to beauty that they don't see the marvel of a sunrise or a sunset. Who could dismiss the reality that there's a God in a sunrise or just a sunset? Or in the words of William Blake, eternity in a grain of sand. Don't you just not like people that don't see beauty in something like that? But sometimes we don't see it for one reason. We're so busy that we're distracted. That's all. We're just distracted. We don't see it. Many of us remember, and we muse over the line that Thornton Wilder put on the lips of Emily in his play In Town. Many of you remember Emily died young, and she's granted a gift to come back to her house in town, and she spends the day just watching and observing the activities of the people. Mothers in the kitchen and dads under the hood of cars, and people walking down the street and working in the factory and in the stores and in the schools, and all of the beauty around, they miss it. Invisible to everybody else except for the stagehand, she turns and asks, does everybody miss the beauty in life? And the stagehand thinks about that and responds, everybody except the saints and the artists, sometimes maybe they see it. Whatever else Jesus is, you can talk about him being a savior of the world. He's an artist, and he sees. And like an artist or a poet or a person that just sings a good song, they paid attention to the world in words, and Jesus puts a priest and a Levite religionist on the road whose responsibility is to care for not just the rituals and the rites in the sanctuary, but also to care for the brokenness it found in humanity out on the roads. And not just the priest, but the Levite, because if he only said the priest, then you would sit there and say, Pastor West, see, that is your job. No, this is our job. Where there is brokenness, we are to find a way to put it back together again. Now, maybe the priest and Levite are very busy with religious perfunctory. And they're being honest to their religious creed. If they touch this broke up man, they get contaminated and they can't go into the temple and work for 7 days, so now they're in quarantine. And who wants to be in quarantine helping somebody? So they look at him and pass by and pray, Lord, help him. A Samaritan comes by, a half-breed. This is very important because those of you who know this story, the unfortunate thing is we know it so well that it has lost all of its shock. But no first century Jew who would hear this story would not be moved at this point just by saying, and a Samaritan. How did he get in this clean story? He too is passing the same route that the priest and the Levite is traveling. Same dangerous stretch of road. And faced with the same option and possibility. Martin Luther King Jr. in his sermon on this passage said that the question that begs response is not what is he doing, how will he do it, but the question is, what if he doesn't do anything? That's the question. What will happen if I pass by humanity and something worse befalls this man than this? And a Samaritan. You still really don't get the feel of this. This is the equivalent of a Ku Klux Klan kneeling down to help a Black Panther. You still don't get it, do you? And that's how severe this story is. This is not a light, trite story of some nice guy going down the road. This is filled with racial innuendo, and there is a lot of dislike on both sides. But there's something about brokenness. I listened last week, I was in Dallas at a national preaching conference, and I listened to the tearful testimony of the African-American trauma surgeon at Parkland Hospital, who said so poetically, when a life is bleeding and dying on the table, we all look alike on the inside. And the Samaritan stops, and he binds oil and wine the wound. Luke is a historian and a physician. He knows what he's doing. He's turning this story upside down. The proper order is you're supposed to pour wine and then the oil for the elixir and then bandage the wound. It's almost like the physician is saying that was the problem with the religion people that passed by. They were paying attention to law and order. They were paying attention to rule and regulation. That comes a time when you have to help people. You just have to help people and disregard the order of things. You get what I'm saying? And so he binds him up, puts him on his donkey, walks him down to the Motel 6. The lights are on. And he makes this beautiful statement where he says to them simply, I'll pay any extra that this man may incur while I'm gone. It's a picture, isn't it, of somebody that you know. It's the picture of another that paid a debt that he did not owe. It is the picture of one that reminds us that he has come to bandage broken humanity. He is the wounded healer. He is the one that has come to restore that which has been broken apart. Who is my neighbor? Last week, I already mentioned it. I was in Dallas, but I was there for the National Preaching Conference, E.K. Bailey Preaching Conference, but I was so angry. I had so much anger. I wish, as a steward of language, I could say it better than that, but I was so angry, and I was hurt and angry. Alton Sterling, Philando Castile, the 5 police officers and the 7 wounded. And now this morning, the last count, 3 dead police officers, 7 wounded, angry and hurt. I didn't know how to express myself. I really didn't. I was a walking time bomb. So much so, I led the service that Tuesday morning, and I was on to introduce one of the presidents of a seminary who happened not to look like me. And I was angry at him, angry. I read what they gave me to read, and I read it unenthusiastic. I just said, let me just get this out the way, and just said, here, come on. He made the mistake that, as all speakers do, you're always looking for a hook line, to warm up with people. And he said, well, I need to make a correction, because normally when they read these things, somebody gets it. And why did he say correction and wrong? I yelled out in a very agitated tone. I read what they gave me. I can't even imitate how annoyed I was by it. And he was smart enough to know this might not be the day to continue with my punchline. In fact, when he stood up to go to open up what he was going to say, I got up and walked out, went down to the cafeteria. And though I was angry and embittered and hurt, I was thankful that I was not so preoccupied that I didn't miss a miracle moment that God had prepared for me. My dean, who was my first professor of religion, Harry S. Wright, was there with his looking glass and reading the New Yorker, and it was a great article that had been written by one of the professors at LSU on the tale of one city, the Baton Rouge I live in, and the Baton Rouge that Alton Sterling was killed in. It's a great article. And I said to Dean Wright, I said, I'm angry and I'm hurt. I was tearful, I was angry, and I was hurt. And Dean, being an octogenarian now and a seasoned pastor, said to me, you have a right to be angry. He knew how to handle me. He knew me since I was a young man entering in the ministry. He said, you have a right to be angry. He said, remember what James Baldwin said, to be black is to be angry in America. He let that simmer, and then he said, but now you, as a steward of God's mystery, have to preach through your anger, and you have to sound a note of hope for other people because they are listening to what you have to say. It was like a burden had been lifted off of me. I'm no sociologist, I'm no social critic. And I wasn't trying to address it that way. I had to be brought back to what my calling was. Back, because I was hurt and I was angry and trying to find voice, how to express anger. Let me just drop an asterisk here, because I know many of you ain't never been angry. You love Jesus and full of the Holy Ghost and tongue talkers, and and I know you have never been offended, but I am hurt at all humanity whenever humanity is mistreated as less than humanity. All humanity. All humanity. And I know at church you're not supposed to agree that you've been angry or hurt. But God's going to bless you the day that you can get honest about your relationship with life. That's the reason why people are stuck, and that's why people act out. And I thought about it. I said, my God, I'm a college graduate. I'm a seminarian. I hold multiple graduate degrees, and then an earned doctorate and have postgraduate certificate. And if I have a hard time trying to work through the mess of humanity, how do you think some young man or some woman who's not fully developed is going to respond to it? So I had to ask God this morning, give me a word and help me preach. I don't know how to preach it, but help me to preach it to help somebody here today that's trying to grapple with fallen humanity. My burden was lifted. The weight had rolled away. My vision had been cleared again, that God had given me a picture of who my neighbor is. My neighbor is anybody to whom I need to be neighborly to. Regardless of what my neighbor looks like, I have to be neighborly to them. That's the Christian ethic. Several years ago, and I'm done, I was on my way home and I was driving down the parkway, and it was one of those fall evenings and the traffic is unusually jammed and horns are blowing and honking and there is vehement speech being spewed out of the windows and vulgar hand gestures, all because a car had run out of gas. When I came behind the car in my truck, I looked and I saw it was a young lady in the car, and you could see she was visibly shaken and had been to work, run out of gas. I let the window down while she's trying to get out the car, not knowing which way to go, push the car, people yelling. I said, "Let me help you." I didn't say, "Do you need help?" because I knew she needed help. I just said, "Let me help you." I said, "Get in my car." I said, "Here's my phone. Call your father and tell him that I picked you up. Let me take you to get some gas, bring you back, put gas in your car, and then follow me, and then I'm going to fill up your car so you can get home." And I gave her a lecture as I would my own children. I said, "Now check your gauge from now on, because you don't want to be out here and run out of gas, and it could have been later than what it is." And I said, and she said, "Yes, sir." I didn't see a little white girl. I didn't see a white girl with blonde hair. I didn't see a white kid. I saw my sister, and that changed the discussion. Out of my anger, I had to be reminded of that. I had forgotten that miracle moment when I was so frustrated with life. God had to bring me back to a place to say, you know what it means to look at humanity as your brother and your sister, because you can't mistreat your brother and your sister when they are made out of the same creative fabric that you are. It changes the way you look at life. Now, it's hard for some of you to get happy on that. And yet, on my way back, looking at the news today, on my way here, the mayor of Baton Rouge was on television at a conference with law enforcement, and he talked about this senseless killing and how to come to, and listen what words the mayor used. He never said Jesus, he never said the Bible. He says, listen, we got to stop drawing lines in the sand, and as brother and sister, we got to kick that line out the way and reach over it. And when we shake hands with another brother and sister, it is the beginning, not the end, but it is the beginning of racial resolutions. Church, I know it's hard. And I know a lot of you don't agree with that. You're looking for a social response. I don't have that. I'm no political pundit. I don't pretend to be one. I'm no sociologist. I'm no social critic. I'm none of that. I am a preacher of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I'm going to stand up on what Jesus says, and I'm going to love God and love my neighbor. Now, you and I, we can't change all of Houston. We can't do it. But we can, as many people are in this room, we can start in our neighborhood. Maybe for some of us, we need to start in our house. And then in our neighborhood and with our neighbors, and we began to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. I'm not talking about throwing no party. Neighbor where I look out for my neighbor. Neighbor when I got my eye on my neighbor's property. Neighbor when I make sure my neighbor's children get home safely when I'm sitting outside. Neighbor where they know that my house is open to them. I don't know how you do it. You find ways. And here's the end of what Jesus said. Now, you can hear sermons on love and neighbor, but once you know what neighbor is, to love God and to love neighbor as self, Jesus didn't say, now go take a test. You want to read it? He said, do what? Go and do likewise. I'll tell you what, you'll feel better. I know I did. Amen. I know I did.
To order today's message, please visit our website at